There is a universal truth in relationships. Desire cannot be coerced. The more a man pleads for a woman's attention, the more invisible he becomes to her. Interest, especially a woman's interest, thrives in space, in mystery, in strength, not in desperate clinging. If you want her to see you again, to look at you with the same fascination she once did, there are steps you can take, not through begging, not through theatrics, but through presence, restraint, and self-respect. The first step is withdrawal with dignity. When a woman senses a man begging, she instinctively feels he has lost his anchor. His pleas signal to her that he has no options, no self-control, no grounding. But when he steps back, not in bitterness, not in anger, but with calm detachment, something shifts. She begins to wonder why he is no longer orbiting her. She begins to ask herself whether she misjudged his value. Silence and space create the oxygen for attraction to return. The second step is rebuilding substance. A woman loses interest most often because she sees stagnation. A man who has stopped growing, stopped leading himself, stopped pursuing his own life. This man becomes predictable, uninspiring, and easily dismissed. If you wish to reignite her attention, you cannot do it by holding out flowers and apologies. You do it by demonstrating movement. Pursue your goals, sharpen your skills, expand your world. A man who is in motion cannot be ignored for long because progress is magnetic. When she sees you growing, she sees once again what drew her in the first place, the potential for greatness. And the third step is re-engaging on your terms. Interest is never regained by supplication. It is regained when a woman feels she must meet you where you are rather than the other way around. When you reach out again, if you choose to do it from a position of strength, not need, be warm but not eager, open but not exposed. Show her that your world does not collapse without her, that her attention is a gift you welcome, not a necessity you crave. This recalibration of power restores balance, and in that balance, desire often returns. The paradox is that you regain her interest not by chasing it, but by redirecting your own. Women are not moved by words of desperation, but by the quiet confidence of a man who knows his worth. To beg is to diminish yourself, to withdraw, to grow, to re-engage with poise. That is how you remind her of the man she once admired, and perhaps the man she will desire again. The first instinct for many men, when they feel a woman slipping away, is to chase harder. They text more frequently, they call, they explain, they plead, they imagine that if they can simply demonstrate enough devotion, enough persistence, she will eventually turn back toward them. Yet this instinct, though understandable, is exactly what extinguishes whatever spark remains. When a man lowers himself into a state of begging, he does not communicate love or loyalty, he communicates a loss of dignity, and dignity is the very foundation upon which attraction rests. A woman does not lose interest because her man is too composed or too confident. She loses interest when she begins to sense weakness where she once saw strength, when she notices that he has become too available, too compliant, too dependent upon her validation, her desire begins to wane. It is not cruelty that drives this dynamic, but biology. Women have always been drawn to men who can stand on their own feet, who are not emotionally enslaved to anyone else, who radiate calm self-assurance. When that disappears, when a man begins to orbit her like a satellite, his gravitational pull weakens. Withdrawal with dignity is therefore not a tactic to manipulate her emotions, but a restoration of balance. It is an assertion that you will not barter your self-respect in exchange for affection. It is the quiet but firm message: I value myself too highly to beg for what should be given freely. This kind of withdrawal is not done with drama or bitterness. It does not involve slamming doors, blocking numbers, or making grand declarations. Instead, it is measured, subtle, and deliberate. You stop initiating the constant stream of communication. You stop rearranging your schedule to be at her beck and call. You cease trying to prove your worth through overcompensation. You create silence, and in that silence, she begins to feel your absence. Absence has a peculiar power. People rarely realize the weight of someone's presence until it is gone. When you withdraw, you create a vacuum, and in that vacuum, she has room to reflect, She remembers the man she once admired, the man she perhaps took for granted. She notices for the first time what it feels like not to have your steady attention. And because human desire thrives on contrast, the sudden lack of your presence can be far more powerful than 1,000 pleading words. Of course, withdrawal requires discipline. For a man who is accustomed to showing his care through pursuit, silence can feel like neglect. He may worry that stepping back will cause her to disappear entirely, but this fear is rooted in insecurity, and insecurity is precisely what repels her. What you must understand is that you are not disappearing out of malice or spite. You are simply reclaiming your ground. You are refusing to offer the one thing you should never hand over cheaply, your masculine composure. There is also a profound psychological element at play. When a man begs, he effectively tells the woman that she is his only source of value, that his world revolves entirely around her acceptance. This is a heavy burden for her to carry, and most women will instinctively recoil from it. On the other hand, when a man demonstrates that he can withdraw without collapsing, that he can hold his own with or without her attention, she feels something very different. She feels curiosity, even respect. She may not admit it aloud, but deep down she wonders why he is no longer so readily available, and that wondering reawakens a form of attraction. It is important to emphasize that this kind of withdrawal is not a cold war. It is not a game designed to punish her. It is rather a form of self-protection. Begging corrodes a man's sense of self. It traps him in a dynamic where he is always the supplicant and she is always the gatekeeper of his worth. To step back with dignity is to refuse to participate in that imbalance. It is to recognize that if her interest cannot be won through your authentic presence, it cannot be sustained by your desperation either. And here is the paradox. The very act of letting go, of loosening your grip, often creates the conditions for her to come closer. When she sees that you are not tethered to her whims, that you are not endlessly available, she is confronted with the possibility that she may lose you. That possibility stirs something ancient and instinctual within her, the urge to hold on to what might slip away. By withdrawing, you do not close the door on her, you simply stop holding it open while she stands indecisively in the threshold. So the first step, the indispensable step, is to withdraw with dignity. It is to pull back, not in anger, but in quiet strength. It is to remind her, and perhaps more importantly, to remind yourself that your worth is not contingent upon anyone else's approval. Begging may feel like the easiest path in the moment, but it guarantees the erosion of her desire. Dignity, on the other hand, is the slow-burning fuel of attraction. When you embody it, you not only give her reason to reconsider, but you also re-anchor yourself in the self-respect that no relationship should ever strip away. A woman rarely loses interest because of one dramatic event. More often, it happens quietly, almost invisibly over time. She begins to notice that the man she once admired no longer challenges her, no longer surprises her, no longer grows. He becomes stagnant. He begins to coast, assuming that the comfort of the relationship is enough to hold her attention forever. But interest cannot survive in stagnation. It must be fed by vitality, by progress, by the sense that the man she is with is still in motion. Rebuilding substance is the antidote to this decay. It is not about performing tricks to impress her. It is not about learning a handful of shallow lines or adopting artificial gestures of confidence. It is about becoming, once again, the kind of man who naturally commands attention because he is actively building something bigger than himself. A man who has direction and purpose does not need to beg for interest. He generates it through the gravitational pull of his own ambition. Think about what drew her to you at the beginning. It was not simply your appearance or your words. It was the way you carried yourself, the way you spoke about your goals, the way you seemed to be on a path she wanted to be part of. Women are drawn to men who embody potential, not potential in the sense of empty dreams, but potential in motion, the sense that you are moving toward a future, that you are building, striving, reaching. When that disappears, she feels as though the story has ended. She loses the anticipation that once made her heart quicken. To rebuild substance is therefore to reignite that narrative. It is to become a man whose life has a pulse. Again, this might mean recommitting to your career, developing new skills, or investing in your physical health. It might mean cultivating friendships, hobbies, or passions that give you energy, whatever form it takes. The essential principle is movement. A stagnant man is easy to overlook. A man in motion is impossible to ignore. There is also a deeper truth. Women cannot admire a man who admires nothing beyond her. If she becomes the sole focus of his energy, she feels not cherished, but burdened. She senses that he has collapsed his identity into hers, and this makes her restless. But when she sees that he still belongs to the world, that he is still engaged with challenges, risks, and pursuits beyond her, her admiration returns. She remembers why she chose him, not because he made her his whole universe, but because he had a universe of his own into which he invited her. Rebuilding substance also demands resilience. You cannot fake it for long. If you go to the gym once or sign up for a course simply to show her you are improving, she will see through it. Substance is not a performance. It is a way of life. It is the daily discipline of bettering yourself, not for her approval, but for your own integrity. And paradoxically, it is this independence from her validation that rekindles her respect. When she sees that you are driven by something deeper than her reactions, she is reminded of the strength that first captivated her. Consider too the power of surprise. Routine kills attraction when it becomes suffocatingly predictable. By developing yourself in new ways, traveling, learning, creating, you introduce an element of unpredictability. She cannot quite pin you down. She begins to look at you with curiosity again, and curiosity is the seed from which renewed attraction grows. The process of rebuilding substance is not quick. It does not yield immediate rewards, but it creates a foundation that is far more solid than begging ever could. Begging may temporarily win her attention, but it erodes her respect. Growth may take longer, but it restores both attention and respect in a way that lasts. And even if she never returns, you will have gained something invaluable. You will have become a man who commands interest by virtue of who he is, not by how loudly he pleads. Ultimately, a woman cannot stay fascinated by a man who has abandoned himself. She cannot desire someone who has ceased to evolve, but she will always take notice of the man who rises again after failure, who invests in his mind, his body, his work, and his vision. That man does not need to beg for interest because his very existence generates it. Rebuilding substance is not simply a strategy to win her back. It is a declaration that you refuse to remain the diminished version of yourself. And whether she returns or not, you will have already won because you will have returned to yourself. There comes a moment when a man who has withdrawn with dignity and rebuilt his substance must decide whether he wishes to re-engage. This is where many falter because they mistake strength for coldness or detachment. They believe that to maintain their power, they must remain forever distant, untouchable, aloof. But this is not strength. It is fear in disguise. True strength is the ability to step back into connection on your own terms, measured, deliberate, and grounded in self-respect. When you re-engage, the manner in which you do matters more than the words you choose. If you return to her orbit with eagerness, if you shower her with the kind of frantic energy that defined your earlier mistakes, she will immediately sense that nothing has changed. She will feel that her power over you remains absolute, that you are still dependent on her validation, and her interest will evaporate once again. But if you approach her with warmth tempered by composure, you remind her that you are no longer a man chasing approval, you are a man offering presence. The key is to reframe the dynamic. Instead of asking for her attention, you offer your company. Instead of trying to persuade her to value you, you allow her the privilege of rediscovering why she did in the first place. This is not arrogance. It is balance. It is the recognition that your life is full, that you are content within yourself, and that her re-entry into your world is not a necessity but a possibility, and possibilities are far more alluring than obligations. Consider what happens when a man re-engages without neediness. She receives a message, not through his words, but through his energy. I am glad to see you, but I am not diminished without you. My life continues, my growth continues, my joy continues, whether you are by my side or not. That message is profoundly attractive. It relieves her of the suffocating pressure of being his entire source of validation. It invites her into his life as an equal, not as a savior. Re-engaging on your terms also means setting boundaries, even subtle ones. You do not rearrange your entire life to fit her schedule. You do not drop everything at the first sign of her attention. You remain generous, but you remain discerning. This signals to her that your time and your energy are valuable commodities, not resources to be exploited. And when something is valuable, it is respected. There is also an element of mystery in this stage. If you have been growing, pursuing new interests and expanding your world, you now carry stories and experiences that she has not shared with you. When you reconnect, you do not dump them all at her feet in an effort to impress. Instead, you reveal them naturally, in passing, as part of who you have become. She begins to notice that you are not the same man she drifted away from. There is more depth, more texture, more life to you. Curiosity is stirred again, and with curiosity comes the spark of desire. Re-engagement then is not about winning her over in one dramatic gesture. It is about consistency. It is about showing through your presence that you are no longer the man who begged, that you have matured into someone who knows his worth, who offers connection without sacrificing dignity. In this way, you allow her to make the choice freely, and it is precisely this freedom that reignites her interest. When she feels that she chooses you rather than that you demand her, she experiences the relationship as something alive, not coerced. It must also be said that re-engaging on your terms protects you from slipping back into old patterns. If you enter this stage still seeking her approval above all else, you will quickly undo all the growth you achieved. But if you re-engage from a place of fullness, knowing that you are whole, whether she stays or goes, you cannot lose. Either she responds to your strength, or she does not. Either way, you remain intact. This is the ultimate paradox of regaining a woman's interest. You succeed precisely when you no longer need to succeed. You hold her attention not by clutching it, but by being willing to walk away with your dignity intact. Re-engagement on your terms means that you choose her without needing her, that you open the door without begging for her to step through it. And in that subtle but powerful distinction lies the restoration of balance between you. So when you decide to reach out again, do it without fanfare, do it without apology tours or grand declarations of devotion. A simple, confident gesture is enough. A message, a conversation, a meeting arranged without fuss. Let your growth, your presence, and your composure do the work that words cannot. She will feel the difference. She will recognize the man before her as someone she cannot easily dismiss. And that recognition may be the spark that brings her interest back to life. Because in the end, interest is never maintained by begging. It is maintained by respect, by curiosity, by the steady flame of a man who knows his worth. Re-engaging on your terms is not just the final step to regaining her attention. It is the only way to ensure that if it returns to stay.